You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about exciting, creative, and innovative ways of living. Produced in Santa Barbara, California, Sustainable World focuses on positive solutions to environmental challenges, solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics, earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe, how to plant a food forest, restorative design, or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned to Sustainable World Radio. I'm Jill Cloutier. My guests today, I have them on the line right now, are Anna Cummins and Marcus Eriksen of the Algalita Marine Research Foundation. Good morning, Anna and Marcus.
Good morning, Jill.
Good morning.
And Anna and Marcus are two of my favorite activists. They combine creativity, humor, and direct action in a potent combination that is educating people around the globe. And Anna Cummins has over 10 years of experience in environmental nonprofit work, education, writing, and campaign development. Anna has worked in marine conservation, coastal watershed management, sustainability education, and high school ecology instruction. In 2004, Anna joined Algalita's research voyage to Guadalupe Island to collect evidence of plastic ingestion by Laysan albatross. In 2007, she joined the Algalita Marine Research Foundation, conducting school outreach and giving public presentations on the plastic issue. And she also founded the Bring Your Own campaign, which we'll hear about later on in the show. And also Marcus Eriksen. I've been keeping an eye on Marcus ever since I first read about his voyage on a raft made of junk, plastic bottles, and other refuse down the Mississippi River. Marcus teaches and conducts research in earth science, lectures at schools and museums, and supervises an annual field course in paleontology in Wyoming. Marcus is Algalita Marine Research Foundation's Director of Research and Education and hosts Commando Weather, a series of public service announcements about the science of weather for the Weather Channel. And in 2005, Marcus created Watershed Wonders, an educational video series packaged with curriculum materials for junior and senior high schools. So Marcus and Anna are now completing the JUNKride, their newest campaign to spread the word about plastic in the ocean. They've actually traveled, they've ridden their bikes from Vancouver, Canada to Tijuana, Mexico. And this is a 2,000-mile coastal route. They've been giving samples of plastic debris collected from the Gyre, North Pacific Gyre, to legislators, educators, and organizations. So could you tell our listeners, Marcus and Anna, whoever wants to go first, about the JUNKride and where you've been in the past month or so?
Well, I can start with just this JUNKride is actually the third phase of a project that we've been doing for almost a year now called Message in a Bottle. So Marcus and I had a chance to sail across the North Pacific Gyre, which is a slow-rotating oceanic current at the center of which our plastic trash is accumulating. Our foundation's been looking at this for the past 10 years. So we went in 2008 from Hawaii back to Los Angeles, and we found that the accumulation of plastic floating on the surface of the ocean had doubled in just 10 years. We also brought back 671 small fish, and we found plastic in the stomachs of over a third of them. So we thought we had to do something fast to get people's attention. We decided to do this three-phase campaign, Message in a Bottle. So phase one was getting these samples out from the North Pacific Gyre. Phase two, we built a raft, which Marcus can tell you more about, out of 15,000 plastic bottles called Junk, which he sailed from Long Beach to Hawaii last summer. And now JUNKride is the final phase. We're cycling 2,000 miles from Vancouver, BC, down to Mexico to give 40 talks, presentations about this issue, and also to give away samples we collected at sea of this plastic soup to legislators, educators, and the media to really show people what's going on out in our oceans.
So this is phase 3 of your campaign. So tell us what the JUNKride tour has been like, and also I think you were married along the tour, and maybe tell us about that.
Well, the JUNKride tour, the purpose is to give away samples of the ocean soup, this plastic soup, to people that can make a huge difference. Individual teachers, organizations like Surfrider, and legislators. We've had a chance to visit 5 mayors. The mayor of Edmonds, Washington, Portland, Oregon, the mayor of San Francisco, San Jose, and Santa Cruz, and show them what the plastic trash out in the ocean looks like. Because once you see it, you're stuck making a moral decision. Do you do something about it, or you turn your back and walk away? And if you do that, you're part of the problem. So we've shown the problem to the right people who can pass the legislation, what we need to end this throwaway culture that we have. Now, to have fun along our 2,000-mile, 3-month bike tour down the coast, we got married. We got married in Big Sur, overlooking the ocean. It was wonderful. It's a spur-of-the-moment eloping along our ride.
We kind of figured it'd be the final completion, or the start of our journey, but we got engaged a year ago, January, out in the middle of this plastic soup, we call it, in the North Pacific Gyre. So Marcus made a ring out of debris that he found floating around that day and proposed to me sitting up in the sail. And we thought it'd be kind of the perfect completion to our story to get married somewhere along this ride. So we've been on the road for over 2 months. We left on April 4th from Vancouver, and we thought Big Sur, the coast of California, would be the perfect place to get married. We met a councilwoman, actually, a council member from Pacific Grove, who drove down with her husband. They married us on the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, and we spent that night in a human-sized nest built by a local artist in Big Sur. So it was really wonderful.
That sounds so incredible. Wow. And so you both employ very unusual and creative tactics to get your message across. So I could see how your wedding and your honeymoon, in a way, is creative as well.
We were even actually wearing outfits made from plastic bags by artist Deanna Cohen, who does wonderful work. She's actually based in Santa Barbara, and she makes these really beautiful pieces out of plastic bags and other pieces of junk. And she made this dress that I wore, and a vest that Marcus wore. She made these back in the 80s out of plastic bags.
I actually have interviewed Deanna and seen her clothes, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, Anna. Well, congratulations, you two.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about the other phases of Message in a Bottle. I think, Marcus, you rafted down the Mississippi, and I've seen some of the videos on YouTube, and it looked like you took almost like a lazy boy recliner chair and then built this plastic raft around it. Can you tell our listeners about that, what that ride was like?
Sure. So back in 2003, I built my first plastic bottle raft. I have 232 2-liter bottles. It's a catamaran design, so 2 hulls. And to be really comfortable, I went to a junkyard and found the front seat of a Ford Mustang. And I put that between the 2 hulls, and I took 2 bicycles made of paddle wheel, and I used that to travel 2,000 miles from Lake Itasca, Minnesota, where the Mississippi River starts, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, this river, this is our nation's largest watershed. It covers 42% of the United States, all are part of 31 states. So it really drains most of our country. And as I was venturing southbound, I was seeing so much trash. It was unreal that I could always look left or right and see just hundreds of plastic bottles and bags and styrofoam cups on the bank of the river floating by me. I remember once paddling along, and I had a gas can on one side bobbing along, plastic, and a milk crate on the other side of me bobbing along. And I realized that our nation's largest export to the world is trash, washing down our coastal watersheds. We have this insane throwaway culture where we make these throwaway products that are used once and discarded, but they're made from a material, plastic. It's a synthetic material designed to last forever, and it does just that. So I had seen all this trash leaving our country, going out to sea, and that's when I joined the Algalita Foundation to find out what it's doing out in the middle of the ocean. And what we've discovered is appalling. I mean, it impacts almost half of the world's seabirds have been found with plastics in or around their bodies, all marine sea turtles, a countless list of fish, 22 different kinds of whales. So the environmental impact is huge. And now, the work that we're doing and that Anna's doing with Synthetic Me, we're finding out the human health impact is tremendous.
So tell our listeners, in case they don't know, and this could be a question for either Anna or Marcus, what the gyre is, how many there are in the world at this time, and why does the plastic kind of congregate there in the middle of these gyres?
Well, everything floats, everything rolls downhill. Every human being lives on a watershed, so all the trash on land is eventually being blown or it flows down the landscape, through watersheds out to the sea. Now, in all the world's oceans, you have currents. And actually the world's major oceans, the North Pacific, the South Pacific, North Atlantic, South Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean, they're actually spinning. It's called an oceanic gyre. It's just sort of like a gyroscope. These 5 areas, they spin. And in the middle is where the currents and the wind slows down. So you get this toilet bowl effect. Now, what we have found in the Pacific Ocean, you get this massive accumulation of these particles of plastic and old fishing gear, fishing floats, and bottle caps, all this trash. Now, we haven't seen the rest of the world. So everything you hear about plastic these days in the ocean is coming from our investigations of just one of these 5 gyres in the world.
And we're actually going to venture, though, next year for the first time into the North and possibly the South Atlantic Gyre to begin doing some of the same sampling we've been doing in the North Pacific. And we hope if we can get good data from all 5 gyres that we can really put this issue on the global map.
Now, Anna, that brings me to you. So Marcus is sailing or paddling, I suppose, down the Mississippi. How did you get involved in this work with plastic in the ocean?
Well, I was working in marine conservation in Santa Cruz as a bilingual educator, some of the local communities. And I went down actually to Santa Barbara to the World Oceans Conference back in 2002, and that's where I first met Captain Charles Moore. I heard him give a talk about synthetic sea and show his documentary, and I was completely blown away that this was new information to me. I thought, being in the, in the environmental world, I would have heard something about this, but I hadn't. So then in 2004, I volunteered with Captain Moore to go out to Guadalupe Island on his research vessel, and we collected boluses. It's like an owl pellet for a seabird called an albatross. It's what they regurgitate, the things that they can't digest. So we collected 30 of these boluses, and we found plastic particles in every single one of them. So that was really my great awakening. That inspired me when I came back to Los Angeles to start a campaign called Bring Your Own, just thinking about solutions that people could engage in right now, every day. Cut back on their use of single-use disposables, the coffee cups, utensils, the bags, the bottles. And then in 2007, I met Marcus, and we 6 months later went to the Gyre, and that kind of sealed the deal. We got engaged. We started working together on this Message in a Bottle campaign, and now here I am, completely immersed in the field.
I'm so glad both of you are immersed in this field, because I think what you're doing and your campaigns are really kind of bringing this issue, which could be such a downer. And it's very sad to hear all this news, but then you do it in such a creative way that it draws people's attention in, and they kind of get carried along, because your videos on YouTube are pretty fun to watch, even though it's a serious topic. And Marcus, is that something that you have kind of tried to do, is to bring creativity and fun into this issue with your voyages and videos, etc.?
Sure. I think you have to have some joy in life and pleasure in what you do, and I enjoy just bringing this issue. It's the ultimate case of out of sight, out of mind. There's no one out there 2,000 miles west of California, middle of the ocean, as far from land in the world as you can go. There's no one there that's monitoring what's happening. And people think that the oceans are pristine, but they're not. They're full of trash. They're full of this fine particulate of waste that many organisms, including fish that we eat, are eating. So to bring this to people's attention and to show someone, here's what the ocean looks like, and show them a sample, it's inspiring, because then you see people change. You see people realize, this is not right. This is morally incorrect that we do this. And you watch them shift, and they want to do something about it. And that's inspiring. So I've been doing this now for at least 5 years at the Algalita Foundation, and it's nice to see this sort of wave of change happening. I think the tipping point is near, where people are realizing that this throwaway culture of using this plastic, abusing it, is wrong. And I think it's changing.
And I think we've also seen through this that people really respond to other people's personal stories. That people don't really engage with raw statistics or data, but they do respond to people's personal stories. You know, Marcus has a very personal story with this issue. I have my own personal story. It's why people really related to An Inconvenient Truth. They watched Al Gore's personal story with the issue. So I think that's something that we've really learned through this issue, that people want to know what other people are doing, and that inspires them to take their own actions.
And one of the things that I would love to hear more about too is so the plastic's floating around in the ocean. And Anna, you talked about how you were sampling, looking at the albatross, I don't know what the term was for it, but
the bolus.
Yeah,
yes,
the bolus, and seeing that these birds were eating so much plastic. So, what effect does the plastic have on animals? And then, Anna, I would like it if you would take that one step further, since we are animals. Talk about synthetic me.
Right. Well, a couple things. When a bird or another creature ingests a lot of plastic, it can lead to blockages in their esophagus. It can lead to dehydration. It can also lead to this false sense of satiation. So they think they're full, having a belly full of plastic, but they're really just full of junk. So that can also impact them in that they don't have room or appetite for their nutritive food. Something else that we know about plastic particles is that they act as a sponge for persistent organic pollutants in the marine environment. Things like DDT, pesticides, other chemicals, flame retardants that wash into our watersheds are not mixing with water, but they'll stick to plastic. So we know that animals are ingesting these plastic particles. We know that these particles can be loaded with persistent organic pollutants. The question now becomes, are we getting those chemicals through our food chain? So when a fish eats plastic particles, is it getting those chemicals into its tissue? Are those chemicals working their way up the food chain and winding up in our sushi? So one of the ways that we're looking at that now is a project called Synthetic Me. We're going to be collecting more of these these small fish that are food for larger fish like tuna and squid that we eat, looking inside their stomachs for plastics and seeing if there's a correlation between the plastic they ingest and chemicals in their tissues. We're also going to do something called a body burden analysis on me. So about a month and a half ago in Portland, Oregon, we took blood samples and we sent them from me and sent them to a lab up in BC. And they're looking for those same chemicals that we know stick to plastic, the PCBs, DDT, flame retardants, to find out what my actual concentration in my body is. And we hope that this will put a human face on the issue for people that maybe don't engage with albatross or fish and think that that's a problem out at sea. When they see what's actually in our bodies, we think that will wake people up.
And this is something, too, that even if you don't eat fish, you could still be taking in the chemicals from the plastic through our use of plastic containers, plastic bags, etc.
Absolutely. There are chemicals, additives in plastics that have shown to leach to our food and water.
Now, Marcus, you and Anna's doing Synthetic Me to put a human face on this. You also sailed, or I think drifted might be the right term, from California to Hawaii on a boat made of, I think, 15,000 plastic bottles. Can you describe to our listeners what that voyage was like? And I know in one scene in the video on YouTube, you caught a fish and then found plastic in its stomach. If you could just tell our listeners a few stories from that voyage.
Sure. I think, well, first of all, Anna and I, and Joel Pascal, he was one of the other crew members on the last research voyage. The three of us, we saw that the amount of trash in the ocean surface had doubled in a decade. We saw these plastic particles inside fish that feed the fish that the world harvests for food. We realized we had this disaster, a global disaster on our hands, and we thought, what can we do to bring attention to what we're witnessing? That's when this idea of junk, this raft, was born. So as soon as we got back from the voyage, we very quickly, within 2.5 months, we built a boat. 15,000 plastic bottles stuffed into giant 30-foot-long socks made from fishing nets, old nets we found. Those were our pontoons. On top of that, 30 sailboat masts laid in like a crisscross fashion to make a square deck. That was our flat deck. And on top of that, an airplane. We found a Cessna 310 airplane fuselage. That was our cabin. That's so we tied it all together, and you can see pictures on JUNKraft.com. See photos of this thing. And we launched ourselves on June 1st last year, a little more than a year ago. And we thought it would be a 6-week voyage. And 12 weeks later, we're still just barely hobbling into Waikiki. I think one of the best stories, or a couple I'll tell you. One is after 3 days on the ocean, day 3, we hit a major storm on 50-mile-per-hour winds, waves going over the airplane, pushed the airplane across the deck, antennas broke, a bunch of our food got washed away, and I called Anna and said, we're sinking. because we were. We actually had the bottle caps on many of the bottles, a few thousand bottles, got loose and water rushed in. And that's when Anna mounted this rescue expedition. She actually came out with this high-speed dive boat with a bunch of volunteers and a big bucket of glue, and we actually took bottles out of the raft, one at a time, glued the caps back on, and put them back where they were. So that was our first, and we spent the next 2 months gluing caps back on bottles as we made our way 88 days across the sea. Halfway across, we found that fish that you mentioned. We found a fish called a rainbow runner. Now this species is one that we directly eat from the sea. And you'll see them in fish markets. You'll see them on menus in restaurants in Hawaii even. A rainbow runner. It's a delicious fish. We caught a small one. I filleted it, put the fillets in the pan, planning to cook it. I opened the stomach, full of plastic. 17 rice grain-sized particles of plastic in its little stomach as big as an almond. Bloated full of plastic particles. And like Anna explained, these particles are not inert. See, people think that plastic in the ocean, it's an inert material. It's going to end up being sediment or pass through animals, no big deal. The truth is they carry pollutants, they transfer pollutants into the organs and tissues of other organisms. So this is the human health component that we saw firsthand out in the middle of the sea. And then 88 days later, we arrived in Waikiki. Averaging 1.5 miles per hour, we could have walked faster.
And instead of polishing teak, you were actually gluing caps on the boat for boat maintenance. And the videos are very. How would someone find those videos that you did a series of PSAs from on the trip, and they are hilarious. Especially the story when the cans were rusted on the boat and you were praying for corn. I think was that it?
Yes, we had part of that first disaster at sea, that day 3 storm, washed all the paper labels off our canned goods. So we played mystery meal for the next 2 months. What is this can of beans, another can of beans, or peas or corn? So we had fun at the time.
And something I was able to see back on land, running the blog and monitoring all the comments, the kinds of people that were connecting with this voyage were new audiences for us, people that we might not necessarily reach when we go do school presentations or talks to environmental organizations, but we had tons of people who were sailors or adventurers or just, intrigued or baffled by what Marcus and Joel were doing that really connected with the mission and learned about plastics, and so many comments that said, I knew nothing about this issue, but, now I'm convinced that I'm going to stop using plastic. And so that was really gratifying just to see that the adventure element really helped to bring attention to this issue.
Yes, and there were interviews that when I was doing research for this interview today, interviews from like yachting magazines or online sailing magazines, which I thought was interesting. What do you think is the most important step that people on land can do? We're creating this plastic soup in the ocean. What could we do to help stop it?
There's a couple things that people can do, and I think it's important to realize that there's no single solution to this issue. It's such a ubiquitous problem. But some things that people can do right now is they can commit to not using disposable plastics, to really making a conscious effort to stop using plastic bags, plastic bottles, utensils, even going into restaurants to ask for your water without a straw. When you get takeout, make sure it's not in styrofoam. Bring your own container or make sure it's foil or paper. So just making a conscious effort in your daily life to not use these throwaway plastics. And also something really important people need to do is to contact their legislators, call or email their representatives, and let them know that they want their legislators to take action, to support bans or fees on plastic bags, to support extended producer responsibility, which asks that our producers take responsibility for the end life of their products. So supporting legislation is really important because the opposition from the industry is ferocious. And if legislators don't hear from their constituents, the squeaky wheel will get the grease. Or, sorry, other way around. But it's important to support this legislation.
And Anna, do you know how much of the plastic in the gyre, in the ocean, comes from us on the land? I think a lot of people are under the impression that boats are dumping plastic in the water. Do you know the percentages on that or approximation?
Yeah, we've seen a study done by the United Nations that shows that on average, around 80% of the debris we find, plastic pollution we find out in the ocean, comes from land. Now, if you were in a place like Hawaii, you might find more like 50% coming from land and 50% coming from the boating industry or from cruise ships. But on average, there's a much higher percentage that comes from land than that comes from sea.
You know, I'm an educator, and I was showing our synthetic sea to a group of fourth graders. And this little boy, after the film, it was silence because they were very touched by the movie. And it talks all about plastic in the ocean, what it does to the birds and fish in the ocean. And he raised his hand and said, "I guess I don't love my Legos like I thought I did." I thought it was so cute. But the kids really were saying, well, aren't we recycling our plastics? And Marcus, I would like it if you would talk. I heard you speak in Santa Barbara on Monday night, and you kind of spoke about the myth of plastic recycling. Can you talk to our listeners about that?
Well, the idea of recycling, it's great for the can, the metal can. It's great for the glass bottle, and it's great for paper. First of all, those materials are truly recyclable. Paper you can pulp and make a new box. With glass and metal, it's a high-temperature melting point, so you can burn off food waste. You can burn off labels and inks and remake the same product. You can really close the loop and truly recycle the product. And also, if those materials are lost in the environment, paper is going to biodegrade. Metal is going to oxidize. And glass is truly inert. But plastic is none of the above. It's difficult to recycle plastic. It has a very low melting point, so you can't heat it up and burn off food waste. For example, pizza grease. If you try and burn pizza grease off of a styrofoam plate, you burn the plate. So to recycle it, you have to wash it, and nobody wants to do that. It's economically not feasible. And then, because there are so many different kinds of plastic, if you take a whole bin, like a garbage bin that's full of water bottles, and you throw in one milk jug or a polypropylene crate or something, you now have changed the composition of that plastic. It's no longer pure polyethylene. It's something different. So you have to sort it very carefully if you want to recycle it. So you really, no company is taking a plastic bottle and remaking a new plastic bottle out of old plastic waste. It's just not happening in this country. What's really happening is your plastic that you think you're recycling, it goes to a recycle center, well, what we should call a recovery center, and it gets redistributed. Typically, it goes to China. I was amazed. I went to our nation's biggest landfill in Puente Hill, where we bury a third of LA's garbage, and they're recovering plastic bags and bottles out of the waste stream. And I asked the guy, "Where's it go?" He said, "China." I asked the same thing at the Burbank Recycling Center. It goes to China. Ann and I asked in Marin County, China. Then you ask them all, what happens then? No one knows. So the truth is, what you think you're recycling is being exported, or it's being downcycled. The companies that do deal with it, they'll make lower quality products. They'll melt it down a little bit, and they'll make things like fake wood for decking materials, or they'll make carpeting. Or if it's really dirty, like most plastic bags and bottles, many of those products just simply get landfilled.
What I've heard, too, is plastic bottles, food containers can never, ever become food containers again. They have to be if they're recycled, plastic is recycled, it has to be turned into something else. So really, I think Americans just believe that we were recycling, we're doing a good thing, but we should really find out what happens, like you said, what happens to the plastic in China.
Once you figure out the true life cycle of things, like we have this short window of convenience where people still like to go to a store, get a cold bottle of water, and not have to carry a canteen with them. They drink their water, then they get rid of the bottle, and they're done, hands-free. They like that convenience, but it has a price. I mean, plastic comes from petroleum, and our country pays a huge price to get access to petroleum, the raw material for plastic. And then after we have that short window of convenience, plastic has a huge lifetime after it leaves your hands. If what's lost in the ocean is hurting our fisheries, hurting other organisms. And also it's leaching out these chemicals into what we're eating and drinking. So if you think of the whole life cycle of plastic, it's just not worth to have it around for throwaway products.
Did you want to add something to that, Anna?
I was just going to say that a project we're hoping to do sometime in the next year is to actually go to China and see what truly happens to our plastic recycling. Because when we give this talk and we tell people that our plastic recycling goes to China, everyone says, well, what happens to it next? And we've heard some of it gets remade into carpeting and fake lumber and fleece, and some of it might be sitting in shipping containers. Some of it might be getting burned. But we want to go see for ourselves so we can really answer this question for people.
And that doesn't even include the plastic components in computer monitors and all of our equipment that ends up going somewhere too and dismantled.
And that's where we think the concept of extended producer responsibility will really work. Because if a company has to deal with or the recycling of a cell phone or a computer or what have you, then they'll start making things that are easier to recycle, things that are easier to break apart into their parts and not be these unwieldy conglomerations of rubber and plastic and metal that are really difficult to recycle.
So what would, with all the work that you're doing, what's coming up next, it sounds like, Anna and Marcus, is the Synthetic Me project, possibly a trip to China. What else can people expect to hear from this wonderful married couple that I'm talking to right now?
We're also, and Marcus can add to this, but a project we're very excited about as well is going out to the North and possibly South Atlantic gyres to start collecting data from other parts of the world, because so far the focus has really been on the North Pacific.
And so just checking and seeing what's going on, because I think these areas are the doldrums right in the ocean, which I've done some sailing, and I've heard you don't want to get stuck in the doldrums because things just kind of, you linger there, just like the plastic.
I think if folks go to JUNKraft.com, you go to the site and you'll see one link to our research organization, the Algalita Foundation, and then two links on the same page, one to JUNKraft, that's where all our videos are, and JUNKride, our current ride, which we're actually not finished. We're here in Santa Monica, 150 miles to go to get to the border of Mexico. So please visit JUNKraft.com and learn more about us and follow our blog and see what we're up to next.
For more background on this issue, people should visit algalita.org and see some of the other things that our foundation is up to. Right now, our founder, Captain Charles Moore, is at sea. So people can follow that journey on the website, algalita.org. They can ask questions to the crew out at sea and ask them what they're seeing and track that journey as it goes along.
And I was going to say, too, Anna's website as well, another site is www.bringyourown.org.
Yes, that's the website I started inspired by the Algalita Marine Research Foundation to encourage people to cut back on their everyday use of throwaways.
Well, thank you so much, Marcus and Anna. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you so much for having us.
You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. For more information or to hear our other podcasts or interviews, visit www.sustainableworldradio.com. Sustainable World Radio is produced by Jill Cloutier. Music by Dana Lyons. Thanks for listening.